My name is Julia. Hello, I'm from GBTEC and I would like to welcome you to our webinar Process Mining for the People. We are listening to two great experts today. One of them is Liam O'Neill from the company BPMD, who representing Peter Franz, who unfortunately could not attend today, will present the expertise in results-based process mining. And our second speaker is Marlon Dumas, the co-founder from Apromore, who will give you an insight of our perfect tool for process mining. You will get the opportunity to ask questions at the end of our presentation. And in addition, this webinar will be recorded and made available to you afterwards. And now I would like to turn the floor over to our speakers and hope you enjoy the webinar.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Julia. So we're very excited to talk you through this topic today. In terms of where we're going to start off, I'll very briefly introduce myself and Marlon will do likewise before giving you a rundown of the structure of the session. So with that, I'll dive straight into my introduction. My name is Liam O'Neill. I am a director at BPMD. We are a boutique management consultancy with offices in London, Philadelphia, and Mumbai. And we specialize in business process management, with a core idea being that we believe an organization's processes are one of its critical assets. And the same way you have teams to look after other critical assets, like you have HR looking after people, we strongly believe that organizations should have an internal team, an internal discipline to look after and derive value from business process management. Hence the name BPMD, Business Process Management Discipline. We're vastly experienced practitioners in the arena of process, having worked with process mining from its nascency as a market relevant technology and having implemented it at a range of clients across the world. Marlon?
So I am Marlon Dumas. I am the co-founder of Apromore, a company that specializes in developing and delivering process mining solutions worldwide. Prior to co-founding Apromore, which was a couple of years ago, I was a consultant, a researcher, and educator in the field of business process management for over 20 years, and also specialized in the field of process mining since about 15 years. And I am here to share everything, I can give you about how process mining can help you to improve your processes, not in 6 months' time or in 12 months' time, but starting from tomorrow.
So in terms of the structure for today's session, what we're going to be looking at, so we spend some time at the outset talking through the concept of process mining and what we mean by process mining for the people, looking at what that means in practice and what that means as a concept, before then getting very pragmatic, where Marlon will take us through a fantastic view of what that looks like on the toolset in Apromore. After that, we'll close off by looking at the broader process mining journey, how you start that journey and how you move from where you are today towards mining maturity, before then touching on some real life examples where process mining has created value for people, and the broader value that it can bring outside of the arenas that we're looking at through prior sections. And then Marlon also dive in with some Apromore specific success stories. We'll talk about how you can get started. So with that, I'll move on to explaining the concept of process mining. So historically, before we had this mature technology, what the landscape was that if you wanted to know how your business functioned, if you wanted to know what your teams in production, in procurement, in finance were doing, you had to go and talk to them. And you had to commit that time to talking to them, capturing what they were saying, and very manually creating visibility of what was happening. And that has benefits. It's fantastic to have visibility, but also you're relying on people's interpretations of a process. And also it can be very resource intensive. And this is the arena into which process mining as a technology stepped. So the core idea is that every time someone uses one of your source systems, they leave a little digital footprint in the snow. So you can see that Steve in procurement created a PO on Wednesday. You can see that Manisha in finance approved it the following week. And the system tracks all of these. There's some digital records which are kept. What process mining does is that it looks across your system and finds all of these digital footprints and pulls them into the process mining engine, brings all of these digital footprints together to start to draw the process out so you can see the journey of a PO. So you can see that a PO was raised on a Tuesday, approved on a Wednesday, and then submitted the following week, and you can track the journey for that PO. It doesn't need to be a PO, it can be any type of record. But you're not just doing that at a micro level, you're not doing it for individual POs, you're doing it at a macro level. So you can be looking at trends over 10,000 POs, 100,000, in some cases over 1 million. What that does, it gives you incredibly powerful visibility of how your process is working in practice and how it is performing. You can see here on the left-hand screen, very often what we think is that as an organization, we have quite linear, quite neat processes, where the steps are very logical and very structured. But when you look at the system, when you look at what's happening in actuality, you get a much messier result. The way in which business operates is messy. It's not always this linear pathway. And it's critical to have an understanding of that to drive fully informed transformation. So that's all well and good. That's process mining. I'm sure a good majority of you have had some exposure to that. And as a concept, it's been around, the concept was founded in the 90s, but as a commercial technology, it's been around since the mid-2000s. But it's only really started to be adopted on scale in the last few years. That's because there's always been a few challenges, and due to those challenges, there's been some preconceptions that have developed. The first is that as a technology, the first preconception is that process mining is only suitable for the significant enterprise scale endeavors, where you're looking at millions of records and you're looking at your absolute blue ticket systems, you're looking at your FTSE 100 companies. And the reason that preconception developed was that in its early days, it was a slightly complex technology. It was sometimes difficult to get a handle on. But as it's evolved, as the tools in this space have matured, as fantastic platforms like Apromore have come to the fore, what you find is that the time to implement, the time to set up, the technical complexity has reduced. It's made it simpler and easier to implement, which means it's no longer this bastion of data maturity that only applies to the largest organizations. Instead, it's something that is accessible. A couple of other key preconceptions as well is that process mining is a technology, it's an emerging technology. And because of that, very often it was IT driven, which is in some ways fantastic, and was good IT capabilities required to get value to set up. But then to deliver value from it, you really need business buy-in, business comprehension. So it's this preconception that it's an IT-driven endeavor when it's not. It should be a business endeavor, and I'll dive into a bit more information later as to why that is and how that creates more value. And then also some people think that it only applies to one or two big systems, and that isn't the case. As I said before, this technology is evolving and it's getting more intelligent. It can, not just SAP, but maybe your Oracle, your Maximus, and some of the more custom ERP systems. It's also starting to become relevant for. So as you can see, as it evolves as technology, as it simplifies, as it increases in relevance to the average person on the ground, it's gone from being just a HQ-driven endeavor to being something that is increasing its global footprint. But to bring it back to the idea that it's not an IT-driven initiative, bring it back to the idea that this should be driven by the business, that it is process mining for the people. What the way in which you deliver value through something like process mining is that you have to have a clear route to that value. You're not doing process mining, you're not doing data analysis for data's sake. Instead, what you're looking for is the business to tell you what they need visibility of, the business to understand what performance, what KPIs are relevant to them. And that's where we'll introduce Tom. So Tom is an operational excellence manager at a manufacturing company. And his day-to-day isn't about data. His day-to-day isn't about technology and how complex it can be. His focus is about customers, it's about sales, it's about doing his job as a manufacturing industrial cog. And he's not going to ask, how frequent is my data refresh, or do I need this particular data table? Instead, he's asking questions that are relevant to him. He wants to know why a certain plant is delayed, why there's returns, why he is having some batches that are being processed quickly, some which are being processed slowly, where he needs resource, where he can focus automation and streamline efforts, and where he can reduce delays. Essentially, all the things that make manufacturing better. Similarly, at this manufacturing company, there's, as with any modern industry, there's a whole host of systems supporting different pieces and parts of the business. And they're generating a ton of data. They're giving the number of RFQs being received and the number of orders, number of work orders, number of returns, number of every single type of record, document, or milestone you can imagine. But there's a disconnect. And Tom is looking at business results when the data is giving you the X's and O's. And this is really where process mining for the people comes into play as a concept. So previously, what you've seen with a lot of process mining initiatives is that they are all bells and whistles, data-driven, IT-driven, where you want to create this massive, all-encompassing, comprehensive picture of a business and of a process performance through data, where there might be upwards of 3, 4, 5 systems involved. Even if some of those systems are only supporting 1, maybe 2 tasks, it takes months to set up and implement. And the dashboards are fantastically informative, but also fantastically complex and don't translate well to the Toms of this world. They don't give you a clear route to value. They don't give you clear insight on what your manufacturing space needs to do to evolve. So what we've got to do is take all that data, take all that potential for analysis, and disseminate it into something that is built for Tom, built for change, built for the business, not built to be as complex as possible, but instead built to be maximizing time to value and delivering pragmatic change. So how that works is every good transformation initiative, every good analysis initiative starts with talking to the people, talking to the key SMEs, the process owners, understanding what the issues, the values, the strategic drivers are. And then from that, making an informed decision as to what data you need to bring in, limiting that scope, setting a hard scope, because that's critical in massively reducing your data QA efforts, massively reducing your implementation time, and potentially having a significant cost reduction implication as well. So you talk to Tom, understand what those KPIs, what those performance indicators are that he needs to be able to assess manufacturing competency. Set up your process mining instance to track just those, trying to minimize the total number of systems, less implementation time. And then whether there might be small gaps, whether it might be one task that's supported by a single system, rather than spending a month or 2 setting up a connector for that single system, talk to those people, do that qualitative analysis and supplement the core process mining analysis with that real qualitative people-driven data, bringing that together to create a transformation roadmap, creating insights that say, this is why you have delays, this is why this plant is functioning worse than the other, and landing at a point where you're not just creating a all bells and whistles dashboard, but instead you're creating real change. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Marlon now to give you a fantastic demo of the Apromore system.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to give you a demo a little bit special. It's a custom-made demo of reflecting an actual case study that we undertook a couple of years ago during the COVID times. This was Tom, I call him, an operational excellence manager at a company that manufactures metallic structures. So they do aluminum and glass structures, occasionally with some wooden components. For example, window frames or door frames or separators that you will find in offices, or shelving systems, for example, for the manufacturing sector or for the logistics sector. Tom, at some point in time, towards the end of the year 2000, had a tremendous problem of late deliveries. Yeah. So and particularly in a section of his organization where they deal with make-to-order structures. So they don't build standardized things, but they make it specifically for every customer request. And they have data about from several systems, particularly from two of them, their CRM system, where their salespeople, are receiving requests for quotations or are working through customer leads, and then they move them into the production planning phase, because in order to tell the customer how much it will cost to build a shelving system, they need engineers to analyze the situation and to analyze the requirements of the customer, sometimes to come up with a customized design, a completely new design of a shelving system, and do all their engineering work and production planning work to come up with a quote that can then be sent to the customer and follow up through into a work order that then will become a delivered product that will lead to cash. So I'm gonna not show you the whole quote request for quote to cash process, but I will focus on the request for quote to actual quote acceptance process, which is the part where they were having particularly the most problems. So the first thing we did is to go to their CRM system and connected to it. So in BIC Apromore, you can connect to different databases from different enterprise systems, be it through database connections or through REST APIs, whatever that is. So this is the technical part of the work. In about a week and a half of work, we managed to get the data from the CRM system, the data from the production planning system, which is component of their manufacturing execution system. We managed to pull it together to construct a table that we could push to Apromore. And it is a bit of an investment. Sometimes this takes a couple of weeks, sometimes it can take 1 month to build one of these pipelines that takes data from different systems and puts it into a tool. But on the long term, it definitely pays off. And Tom has not regretted a single bit to have made this investment. Why? Because given this, he can then, and his team of analysts can connect and generate different views of their process entirely from the data. So we are not going to draw anything. We're not gonna need to go and undertake extensive workshops to understand it. the process, we do it in a data-driven manner. We put the data first and then the knowledge of the people on top of that, rather than starting by a complicated, time-intensive exercise of trying to manually map the process. So with this data set that was produced by a pipeline that we produced in less than 2 weeks with their data engineering team, teams of analysts can go and do several things. They can discover the process model and explore it to analyze different types of wastes, rework, waiting times due to bottlenecks, over-processing, all different types of waste, pretty much all the 7 different types of waste in the Toyota system. They can then construct dashboards, particularly to compare how different, for example, how are we performing for different types of products, aluminum products versus glass plus aluminum products. They can slice and dice the log to separate, cases that are delivered to high-end customers versus, budget customers, etc. So, for example, this is one of the process maps that we discovered. Of course, everything has been reconstructed. This is not the real data. We reconstructed an extract of it. And this is how it looks at a high level. So the real process is relatively complex. And one of the things that was very striking for Tom is the fact that there were 87 different ways of executing the process, from the request for quotation to submitting the quote from the customer. He could not imagine. He thought that there were about a dozen different ways of executing this process, not 87 different ways. The amount of variability in the process was way beyond what he estimated. Moreover, the 2 most frequent ways of executing the process, which you can expect in here, which is starting from a completely new product design versus customizing a product design, these 2 pathways for executing the process only covered about 40% of the cases in the process. 60% of the cases in the process followed a very long tail of different exceptions that were happening in the process. So, definitely a lot of food for thought in terms of how to standardize this process to be more efficient and to deliver better on the customer quality. So one of the things that they observed very, very quickly by, exploring the process map is a number of rework loops around the preparation of the production plan and the analysis of the request for quote. And then they discovered that actually it is these rework loops that are causing the greatest amount of effort in the process and that are causing the greatest amounts of delays in the process. They also, by just switching to different perspectives, they realized that they had a big bottleneck around the task where the sales engineer the production engineer was preparing the production plan, and they knew that they needed to tackle themselves that particular part of the process and slash the amount of rework that was happening exactly in this part of the process. One of the questions they had is like, why are we having some delays? Their SLA for responding for requests for quotes, which are relatively complex actually in nature, is 2 weeks. Usually they manage to respond to a request for quote in about 1 week, but sometimes it was taking them 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks to respond. So what we did with them is that we applied the powerful filtering capabilities of BIC Apromore, and we came up with a separation between on-time cases and late cases. And then with a click, we dashboarded the differences to identify the root causes of the difference between them. And we managed to find, of course, that, late cases had been happening, especially after the COVID lockdown. That's something they already knew, that, they had a spike in late cases after the COVID lockdown in March to April of 2020. But then they also discovered that the cases, for example, for which they were late, were cases where the number of amendments were twice larger than in the cases that were on time. So they knew what particular type of amendment in their process they needed to slash down. They also did something we call model comparison for root cause analysis, and they confirmed that indeed it is the amendment of the request for quotes that is causing the delays that they were observing. And as a result of this, and now digging deep into specific cases of the process, and then conducting brainstorming sessions to see how they could have improved specific cases where there were amendments, they came up with around 3 changes in the way they handle the preparation of production plans and the analysis for quotes, and that actually reduced the amount of rework and therefore the amount of effort they were produced, and reduced the number of SLA violations, from around a 10% SLA violation rate down to around a couple of percentage points of SLA violation rates following the implementation of these changes. So, and this end-to-end scenario illustrates effectively how process mining can help you to improve your process, not by embarking in 6 months to 12-month project, for God's sake, but just by looking at your process in a very pragmatic way, data-driven way, combining data plus domain expertise to give you exactly laser-focused insights to do your performance improvements. Back to you, Liam.
Brilliant. That was fantastic. Thank you very much, Marlon. So now that you've been walked through the concept of process mining for people and then seen what that looks like in practice, we're going to look at some of the pieces around that, how it's creating value and what your journey might look like. So what I'm going to do now is just share my screen, and hopefully you can all see this. So the process mining as a capability, as a technology, as an area of interest. As with anything, there's different levels of maturity. You'll find some organizations who are trailblazing, are very much at pioneering end and looking to layer in additional technologies with process mining. And then there's some companies who are at the very nascency of that journey. And the value of process mining, the value of having a people-driven scope to this initiative is that no matter where you are on this journey, you can deliver value. So we like to think of it as there being 4 key phases to this journey. The first of that is the sporadic maturity. So you've moved past having no process mining maturity, no visibility of process performance. Instead, what you want to do is get to a point where you can do very basic snapshot analysis. And this is where you take a extract from your source systems, load it, and do a single one-time analysis using that. Very useful for actually defining some improvements, as long as it's a very controlled scope, but it doesn't give you a contiguous feed of data. So that sporadic phase, usually it takes 3 to 5 weeks to get to the point where you can do that. You then graduate into the continuous piece, which is where Marlon very capably demonstrated. It's where you set up that data pipeline. It's where you set up that recurring connection to a source system. And through doing that, what you do is you create a platform with not quite real-time, but almost real-time data, which you can analyze. So it's not just a one-time analysis and improvement, but rather you're continually seeing how your process performance evolves over time, and you're seeing any compliance issues, and you can address those in nearly real time. You might just do that for one core system, maybe 1 or 2 systems, but what you might want to move on to eventually is getting a more comprehensive picture. Once you've proven value, that's where you might start to look to bring together multiple systems and string those together and integrate the data so you can cross a plethora of different systems. This is where you'll get to eventually, if there's a value proposition to doing this for your organization. It might just be that you want to set up to one system and manage everything else qualitatively, and that's absolutely fine. The multi-platform one does give you fantastic visibility across different systems, across different end-to-end processes, across different functions. I should mention here, one of the other absolute values of something like process mining over pure inbuilt system BI tools is that it doesn't look at just, you can string different systems together. So you're not just looking at how an RPA bot performs in a silo. You're not just looking at how one of your SAP modules performs. Instead, you can look across the process. You can see I've automated a little piece in accounts receivable, and it looks like the automation is working fantastically. The UiPath bot tracker is saying it's executing 1,000 times with 100% efficiency. But with process mining, you can look across the entire end-to-end process and say, yeah, that bot is automating it, but it's actually not delivering any end-to-end benefit. And then the final phase of maturity is what we call integrated. And that's where you have the technology set up, but more importantly, it's embedded across the business. The people on the manufacturing floor, they refer to process mining on a regular basis. It's part of their job to see how that function is performing. The risk manager integrates it with how they do risk management and compliance audits. The procurement team looks at it on a regular basis. The senior management have their own dashboard, and it's just built into the way of working. So whilst there's a long journey to get to full process mining maturity, starting this journey and starting to deliver value from it can happen very quickly, in a matter of weeks, with absolutely able to get up to a point where you've got a continuous data feed and delivering value through that within a quarter. So we're going to look at a couple of case studies here, a couple of times where we've helped organizations through applying process mining to analyze some end-to-end processes. I'll start with a plan to build use case, just looking at from the design of a construction to it being actually built. And in that case, there was this massive growth within the organization and increased demand for these types of builds. And with that massive growth came non-centralized, non-standardized, some non-standardized practices. And the business was aware of this, but they had no way of getting absolute visibility onto how one site was being built versus another, and where there were those deviations. So in this initiative, we worked with the organization, created this process mining analysis across plan to build. What that did was there were a number of hypotheses around some of the steps that people maybe weren't doing, and that those steps might have an overall beneficial or negative impact on the overarching process. We found one of the communication steps was often being skipped by contractors, outside contractors. And in the cases where it was skipped, it actually, between the prior phase and the next phase, it reduced cycle time, but across the overall process, it increased it. So whilst that contractor, it might seem to speed it up, it might seem by skipping this comms piece, we're actually making it go quicker. By looking at the step back, the macro level process, you can see it had a negative impact. It highlights the need to enforce that to prevent. Range of other insights, but just in the interest of time, I will move on to a couple of interesting ones. Another fantastic one was working with the procurement lead for a French construction organization. And we, procurement and finance leads, we created an analysis of the procure to pay process. Now, this organization was not traditionally process driven. They had very basic process maturity, and they were very much reliant on SME's expertise, the ingrained expertise. What happened through the analysis was that we created this visibility of procure to pay. And they knew there was a bit of a problem with three-way matches. Finance were unhappy with how three-way matches were being done. But the procurement team did not see this as a priority. It was something that was a mild inconvenience. Similarly, warehouse had no visibility of the pain that some of the things they were doing was causing this three-way match area. But through the analysis, what it highlighted was it wasn't just a little problem with three-way matches. for finance. It was a massive problem to the entire procurement system. It was, I think it was, I've got the number here, but it was around 50–60% of cases where there was a free or match failure. Analysing the source of that, there's a small portion of it were due to procurement, and a massive proportion of it were due to failures and miscommunications at the point of goods receipt, where there was becoming this communication cycle between finance to procurement and then to goods receipt. So qualitatively looking at it, finance seemed was a problem with it. They were telling procurement then just forward an email to the warehouse team and they'd look at that. The data says, look, finance have a massive problem. It has a massive impact across the end-to-end process. I'm speaking to the wrong person. I need to be talking to warehousing. They're the root cause for these failures, and they need to be educated on what they can do better to alleviate any of these free and match failure points. After some very basic change initiatives, just rolling out some procedures to the warehousing staff and changing the line of communication for the AP finance team, it saved, we did an analysis a few months later, it saved around 16 days in the overall AP cycle time, which is a massively significant saving for what was just a smaller phase of the process. And then the final one I'm just going to touch on is in a technology sector. We work with a major company to analyze the order to cash process. And this started as an initiative where we were focused on the customer. And we're looking at what the customer touch points are, what events, what systems are used at those touch points, and how can we assess the time between these customer touch points and how that affects the customer journey, and that affects the customer satisfaction, that affects the successfulness of the engagement. What Process Mining did was it highlighted all of the data points behind these customer interactions, and it enabled transporting. You can see if it's between request for quote and submission of quote was over 2 weeks, the success rate dropped from around 30% to around 15%. And we created a very exciting CX change case built purely around looking at the customer. This is very much process mining for people. It's looking at what a particular person in the organization needed to do their job. This company's CX lead needed visibility of these touch points, and then setting up the mining instance and focusing on that and delivering value around it. Afterwards, we then scaled it and looked at it from an OpEx angle and found some rework opportunities, like around PO approvals that massively improved overall cycle time. We're very much in this mind of process for people. You put yourself in the position of one of the key SMEs at an organization. You think, what value do they need? You talk to them and identify that value. You build your investigation around that initially, not just a full plethora of data. And with that, I'm going to hand back over to Marlon at this point.
Absolutely. So a process mining for the people is really about a very focused approach to implementing process mining in an organization. Focus means we start with, single processes, and we build up from there. We get success stories very quickly. It's also about focusing on certain vectors of value. One of the mistakes we see very often is that process mining initiatives want to use everything and achieve everything, and that implies very slow time to value. And in process mining for the people, we have, by analyzing more than 100 engagements that BPMD, Apromore, and GBTEC have done separately and together, we came up with a number of vectors of business value of process mining. And we have identified that there are 5 vectors of process mining value. Achieving transparency. Process mining gives you transparency into your processes, increasing efficiency and productivity of your workforce, enhancing the quality, like on-time delivery rates and the customer experience, supporting governance, risk and compliance, and facilitating agility. And in every project that we engage, we allow ourselves to pick up on one or two of these vectors, and that allows us to focus in delivering certain improvements that are tangible within a short period of time. So, for example, we have helped an organization to reduce the time for customer onboarding by achieving transparency into the behavior of the customers. We have helped an insurance claims handler, claims manager at an insurance company to reduce by 37% the violations of their internal policies, which were causing them, creating a lot of regulatory risks for them. We have helped, a company in the supply chain industry to identify sources of waste, along all the 7 sources of waste of the Toyota system, amounting to more than 1 million of recurrent savings per year. And we have helped an e-commerce company after the COVID times to increase their on-time delivery rate by 74%. And we have helped another insurance company to reduce their 30-day SLA violation by a quarter, which greatly improved their customer feedback, as well as helping them to reduce the fines that they have to pay when they go above this 30 days limit. And that is process mining for the people. And we are here to help you. And maybe Liam, you can say something about how we can engage with anyone in the audience who would like to, learn more about how to get this applied in their organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. If anything that you've heard today has piqued your interest, if you think that process mining is something that could be relevant for you, or even you just want to learn a little bit more, what all attendees today can receive is a free trial of Apromore, I believe, and a free process mining consultation and assessment. So do reach out to me. I'll reach out the email address that's specified there, and I will look to coordinate that session and that trial environment with you, such that you can see if that is something that is feasible in your organization, and we can start to plot what your journey along the process mining roadway looks like.
So we have a number of questions. So maybe I will take the first question. It's a bit technical about algorithms behind the magic of Apromore. You did see the quality of the BPMN models that I was comparing, which were entirely derived with the data. That is due from the very start. We have been using the most advanced algorithm for process mining, which is called the split miner. And that is all based on very rigorous evaluations. We didn't pick an algorithm because we like it. We pick it because, we have extensively evaluated on real life data sets. So we really specialize on dealing with complex processes, untangling the complexity and allowing you to pinpoint those rework loops, those exceptions, those aborted cases that are affecting customer experience or efficiency, depending on the business vector that you are trying to tackle. I think the second question is for you. Amwar asked, is it true that if an organization disposes of a process-aware information systems, is it the case that all organizations, will have their processes running in a single system in a way? Or, what happens when we have, like multiple systems? Yeah, maybe you can tell your experience about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of having a BPM suite, I'm a big advocate of having a single unified BPM suite to act as a single source of information. One process mining platform, one process modeling platform, and bringing those together and having a single point of reference for how you do your job, which is your process modeling, and how that is performing, which is process mining. So that's the BPM side of things. I strongly recommend having a unified suite there. GBTEC and Apromore together is a superb suite in that space. From the operational side, look, realistically, across any organization, you're not just going to use one system. It's not just SAP, and it's not just Oracle, and it's not just a custom workflow engine that got built for you 20 years ago. there's liable to be many different operational systems in effect. One of the examples that we set up a number of years ago is a tech and telecoms organization, and we did quote to order to cash to ticket to close, which is a bit of a mouthful. And what that was 5 systems across an entire end-to-end. That started with a Salesforce front end, which fed into a SAP order management piece, which fed into a custom OCR tool, a invoice processing tool, and a ticket management ServiceNow tool. Now, with process mining, there's a concept called the golden thread. Oh, that's what we colloquially call it. And the idea there is that in ServiceNow, you raise a quote and that's got an ID. That's great, you can track your ServiceNow data. If you want to track that quote through its journey from ServiceNow onto SAP, you need to be able to relate that quote to a PO on SAP, link it, and continue the golden thread. So you follow a quote, then it becomes a PO and you're following it through its SAP journey. And then when you get to the back end and it's going into your OCR or your finance tools, again, you've got to find a way of connecting it. And if you find this way of connecting it, fantastic, you can build this integrated journey, this integrated process mining journey. So you can see right from quote all the way through to it being invoiced, through to it being raised a ticket and closed. So that's one of the absolute beauties of process mining as a concept, that it does give you this cross-system, cross-function, cross-process visibility. I hope that answers your question. If I've at all misinterpreted, Vishal, please do message and I'll endeavor to get it next time.
Definitely. So, and the final question that we have is quite related to that. And that is, how do we now, pretty much a similar question, but at a more technical level, how does it look like in Apromore when we have to integrate multiple systems like? So there are two ways of doing that, and it really depends on the specific IT architecture and technical requirements and security requirements that the customer have. You know, for example, when we work in regulated industries that manipulate very sensitive data, like in the banking sector, in the telco sector, in the government sector, we tend to use a push approach to data integration for process mining. That means that we work with consultants and data engineers in the organization to build pipelines that take the data, you know, sanitize it to make sure that, you know, no private data goes out of the system from the source, because it's not like you can take the data and sanitize it later. You have to sanitize it at the source. Integrate it into a pipeline, which we usually build using Airflow technology, and then pushes the data coming from multiple systems in an integrated manner into Apromore. So that's what we call the push approach. You build the capability of extracting the data internally out of your data lakes, out of your different systems, and you build pipelines internally in the organization that then push data into Apromore via the API. And then in Apromore, we also support a pool-based integration approach, where now from the Apromore toolset, you can go into the ETL environment to create so-called data pipelines, where you establish connections to databases of different systems or through APIs, and then you extract a number of tables that are relevant for your analysis. And then usually these tables represent different objects. One of them can represent a request for quote. Another one gives you information about your purchase orders, another one about your invoices, etc. And you start joining these tables corresponding to different business objects through different types of join operators. Could be like, you know, traditional database joins, just concatenations, unions, and a very smart option we have at Apromore is what we call the parent-child union, which is an operator that takes the data set of a parent process and the data set of a downstream or child process and smartly joins it together, trying to find the right correlation identifiers to join them together. So, for example, we can use this to join the data of an insurance policy, you know, how the policy goes from being created to being renewed to being suspended, etc. We take that data set from one table and we take the data set about claims, you know, that also some of them have references back to the insurance policies. And we just say, please join them. And one is the parent process and the other one is the child process. And Apromore's ETL environment figures out how to join them in such a way that you have an end-to-end process view all the way from the moment the insurance policy was created throughout this life cycle, including all the claims that that customer made and all the payments that were made for those claims. So you manage to construct end-to-end views of your process by importing and combining tables corresponding to different business objects in your process. At a high level, that is how it works. At the detail level, there is a lot of complicated machinery inside Apromore to kind of allow that to happen through a point-and-click environment like the one I am showing you, that will then allow you to compose your event log out of different objects that have been combined through some intelligent algorithms. And with that, I think we have answered the questions, Liam, and I think we can, we are getting close to drawing our conclusions. Maybe a final word from your side, Liam, to close.
Yeah, I think that was a great plethora of questions that got asked there, and that was a great, it's a really good demo of how that works, Marlon. That's, I think the parent-child is very much what we were talking about, golden thread almost. Fantastic demo. So if something from this webinar resonates with you, if you think that you as an organization could benefit from some SME focused, some results focused process mining, as I said, please do reach out. Marlon and I are more than happy to help shape that journey, your process mining journey in tandem with you. So my thanks to Marlon, to Julia, and to the team behind the scenes who helped pull together a lot of the content for this. And hope you all found this to be a fantastically insightful session.
Thank you. Okay.